you're a founder. Um, so why did you found Earthaven?
I got involved in intentional communities in the late 60s. Early 70s is more accurate. Uh, and helped start a commune in upstate New York in 1970, in the era of communes. And I believe in, it suits me, and I believe in that kind of lifestyle when people are just a together thing, a tribe thing, in this challenging and chaotic world. It's very nourishing and encouraging. So I've just done community all my life. It was a lot about what I was doing in my undergraduate work at the New School in New York, and then I went out to California and lived collectively as often as I could, and then helped start another intentional community. It was sort of incidental, but in southern Arizona, out in the desert. A place that didn't make a name for itself. And again, the first community was called Mulberry, upstate New York, and it lasted a couple of years. Learned a lot. Disbanded, went to California. Left California after a decade of education and study and experience, and living with various groups of people, and wound up in this other kind of commune in southern Arizona called Shanti. It's out in the desert. It was a delicious opportunity to. We weren't very serious about like what are we doing here, but we loved living the way we lived without a calendar or a phone. It was, for me, the biggest dropout kind of experience I ever had, and that was good. A good clock reset kind of thing. Like, oh, we don't have to be run by all that stuff. And then I moved to Florida, and I became a sannyasin with Osho Rajneesh. And we had a huge, well, international, but in Gainesville, Florida, we had a pretty huge, small town, intentional community around some very specific ways of life. But we all lived in different houses, or we lived together in different houses. And so community was just the way to live, one way or the other. But in fact, when the Rajneesh community disbanded, or better yet, went back to India, and then just a few places in the country remained, some of my closest friends in Florida wound up coming up this way. And when it was my turn to leave Florida, I came up to see them. And the opportunity we had always talked about starting another community. Like the one in Florida was coming apart, but we were all about communal living and all of the things that had been part of the big commune in an intentional way, smaller intentional way. We trusted each other really well, blah, blah, blah. So they were involved, and so when I came up here to visit, the Earthaven story was coming to life. It had been brewing for several years, and now it had come to a solidifying position, and my friends thought, well, I'm the perfect person to get involved. I had been a publisher. I had published a statewide networking magazine in Florida for 5-6 years or so, and they felt like I had the ability to help it happen, so they were very encouraging to me to get involved. And I was excited. Wow, look at this. All these people who had the original Earthaven people were mostly people in their 40s who had some spiritual community background. They'd lived, there was some Zen folks, there was some Sufi folks, there was us from the Osho community, there were people with more of a shamanistic connection. So it really was it was a miracle that we started this community, because we didn't all know each other that well or whatever, but it was just like one of those things. So it was the natural outcome of my whole adult life or kid life, because my feeling is, well, didn't I grow up in community? It wasn't an intentional community, except that everybody who was living there seemed to be intending to live there. You know, I just grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in a low-rise community. There weren't any really super tall buildings or anything, and it was a working class place where it felt safe, and everybody seemed to know us because my dad had a store. So I think I always felt like I was in this big community. Some people were Christian, and some people were Jewish, and some people were black, but we were all one big thing. So it felt good. So it made sense to keep looking for that. And I'm sure you do know about family constellations, that kind of work.
Yeah, a little bit.
So in the first family constellations session I participated in, I was talking about my disappointment in what was happening at Earthaven, I think. And anyway, what evolved as she was directing me to what's the source of this was this connection to my immigrant grandmother, who came to this country, you know, in the 20s from Europe with her children, her husband and her children, under duress, not because it wasn't safe to stay in Europe, and because there was also hope in this country, but economic hope in this country. But she never adjusted. She didn't learn the language well. She didn't learn how to read English. She remained a person. And so my love and connection to my grandmother was sort of like she never found her place. And I was carrying, according to this session we did, this search for community, and it would never end, because it wasn't really about a real community that I would be in, but it was about that identification with that unsatisfied longing, you know, kind of thing, which we all have anyway, because we're all wanderers on this planet at this point. And a lot of my study and reading these days keeps coming up about how we are meant to be tribal. That's how we learn how to be safe on the planet. And the possibility of really being safe anyway is such a huge leap from our evolutionary, cellular, brain-oriented needs, from what I can understand about myself and about, you know, other cultures and stuff. So anyway, that's why I helped co-found Earthaven, because it was the answer to where I was headed. I mean, when my mom passed away in Florida and I packed up and said, okay, where do I go next? I thought I was going to go somewhere near an ocean. I never thought I'd be in a cold climate in the mountains, because it's not my thing. I grew up by the ocean. But this exciting project with my closest friends was going on, and so I took advantage of that. Was more important than location. And of course, it's crazy to think about living at a long-term intentional community at an ocean zone. We used to joke in Gainesville that we were 200, where we lived in Gainesville was, the high point was 250 feet above seawater, so we could stay there. And we'd be beachfront property. Such a joke. Anyway.
You mentioned, you made reference to the story of Earthaven. And so what would you say the story of Earthaven was when it was getting started?
It's in the Remembership Covenant. Have you seen that document? I can send you a copy, and I'll show you. I'd have to go upstairs to get my framed copy. The desire to combine in instinctual and experiential awareness of the oneness of everything beyond the way our minds are conditioned, a desire to develop more and more awareness and lifestyle honoring that, at the same time that we get as close to, that we return to nature, that we do this in a land-based situation, that those two can't be separated really, that you really can't do it in a city. You know, even though it's where a lot has to be done because that's where people are. What we wanted to do would have been really impossible there. You know, it's like how much can we stretch out and let nature or whatever words you want to use, life, guide us. You know, so a lot of our early designing even was done through journeying and imagination and stuff like people here now are less likely to appreciate or feel safe with. The way, you know, the way we were willing to trust the information we were getting that wasn't verifiable in any way. You know? But we had a hum among us, a lot of trust and excitement and a sense of, I don't know what you'd call it, almost like wonder, like how do we get so lucky to find each other and come upon this decent piece of property that we could maybe do this with and have enough intelligence and guidance and resources to actually own it. Because, you know, that's a big thing for us, is like we paid off this property through some intelligent design at the beginning of how to do it in a very short period of time. And our feeling was, once we own the land, anything's possible. Until we own the land, it's all if. So we learned, we surprised ourselves. Unfortunately, you could say the consequence of that was all the money went into paying the land, and we didn't build enough infrastructure. Or we didn't build as much infrastructure as we sometimes lamented that we hadn't done, and still haven't done. You know, like, we have an intentional community of this size, and we don't have a kitchen, a real dining thing. It's a shock. You know, it's a shock. But then there's this enormous fear of debt. Oh my gosh. Like, some of us, we don't want to do banks. We never did banks, but we're as good an investment as anything. We could borrow money and do things, and we have people who will, I mean, we haven't really tried a proposal through council to do a specific thing like that, and it might pass and everything. But with debt, you really want everyone on board, otherwise it's nagging at you. But that's what it would seems like we're going to need, or we're just going to have to wait till everyone has taken care of their personal needs before they get back to how do we give our resources, particularly skill and ability to gather resources, to the building more of what we need. You know, Valerie, who's not done well as a appreciated member of the community, but was the key motivator in the beginning, whose ideas about development were excellent and helpful. Where was I going with that? She brought guidance from Shannon Farms to us right away that said, you've got to build your community center first. If you let people build their houses first, they will never build a community center, which Shannon Farms didn't do until a few years ago, you know. So we managed to hold the horses at the gate for 3 years from the day we started till we had to say, okay, build your house. Because people were like, I've been here 3 years and I still haven't got a place to live, you know. So it was in a way premature, because all we had was that council hall and the kitchen that we eventually had to surrender to the neighborhood it was in. We had this great plan for the Hut Hamlet, which you know what I'm talking about? With this great plan, originally you could build a hut in the Hut Hamlet as an experiment to teach yourself how to build, which you then would lease a site somewhere and build a real house from. So all these experiments went on, and part of the deal was, okay, you can't spend, Earthaven's going to buy back your hut when you move out, but you can't put a higher price on it than $7,000 because we won't be able to buy them all back if we set a higher price. And we probably could have negotiated up from that. But right off the bat, people just flipped the bird and said, okay, I'm going to spend what I want to spend. Do me something. And that wasn't really their attitude, but it was like people were spending $20,000 on these huts. They destroyed the possibility that so individual freedom can be a problem. You know, so what are you going to do? You're not like, we're not a top-down organization, so we're not watching everything someone does, so they get the choice to build their hut, and we think they're going to accept the burden of the extra money, but then it becomes really clear they're not going to sell their thing back to us for $7,000 or even $10,000. They want their money back. And that's another thing that really surprises me about people in general, is that they expect to invest in a building, live in it, this is true of the world, live in it for a bunch of years, and then sell it for more than they put into it. What does that mean? I don't understand that kind of thing. You used it. But I'm coming from a life where people always rented. Nobody ever owned anything except my parents' friends. You know, I lived in a working class world where most everybody seemed to be a renter at any rate. And that's not the mentality that I'm familiar with, so I'm continually surprised. People really expect to do that. They're capitalists. It's the insidiousness of capitalism that just is shocking to anyone who has different values than that, right? So
I'm going to ask the two sides of this question. How do you feel like, you know, so 25 years later, how do you feel like Earthaven has fulfilled the sort of original intention? And then the other side, of course, being how do you feel like it has diverged or has not fulfilled?
Yeah, I'd say it's too soon to say anything really cohesive about that whole story. I can respond and say that the mission is still alive and well. I'm going to sneeze. You can cut that out of your thing. Maybe I'm going to sneeze. Let's let it happen. It wants to happen. It's funny. I'll start to talk and it'll happen. The mission hasn't really changed. It's been reworded, so I could give you a link to the Remembership Covenant, which is oddly worded, and you know, was one of the documents with which we just I as a wordsmith had to give up after a while on, like, can we change this word? Can we change that word? What does this mean? And just like, okay, we kind of know what it means. Let's go on with it. And then the current thing you'll find on our website, and it's in the council hall, of our mission, vision, and these main goals, they're really the same. They're just articulated more specifically now than they were at the time. And they're still alive. Those goals are all really still alive. So nothing that we've done has made those goals impossible, from what I can tell. So, but we're just in the maybe it's not infancy, but 25 is not a good comparison to a human being's life. We're just adolescent here, you know. It's reasonable, you know. Not everyone here has been here 25 years. So you can't really, the community, the land is owned by us for 25 years, and a handful of people have actually been here that long. And most of the people have been here at the most 10 or 12 years. And a lot of those people have been raising families or creating relationships or finding ways to earn a living. So I don't know if I answered your question, because I can go off on any direction.
No, that was you answered. You gave me an answer.
I did. That's for sure. I'm happy to be able to do that.
So where do you see Earthaven going at this point?
I think what we really want to do is develop our neighborhoods, figure out how to help people develop their neighborhoods. So this neighborhood is developing. It has a cohesion. VT has a cohesion. The Hamlet has a cohesion. The other neighborhoods are not quite so clear. I would say the neighborhoods at the front are also better. The one that's by the farm, called Gateway, is so tiny that it's almost, it's its own thing. But the people there are very well connected to the whole community, to their neighbors inside the community, their neighbors outside the community. So it's a neighborhood anyway, and I don't know how else it can develop. And then the people around where Diana they have a limitation because they're like in this. That's as far as they can go. A lot of us can break up what were original home sites into smaller things. I'm not sure how well they can do that there. But they get along well. They seem to be cohesive in that way, which is nice. But we have a lot of other places that are either outlying and therefore not so attractive to people, or just going to be the next things that get taken up as developing. We'll see what happens there. Where were we going with that? Your question was about
where's it going?
Yeah. So I have some encouraged feelings about where we are also potentially headed in terms of our spirit or the soul of Earthaven. When it's been like, okay, this wonderful thing has happened, which is maybe 10 or 12 people or more, younger people who have been here 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years waiting to become members or thinking about it and then deciding to become members are just like boom, 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 becoming members now, ready to do it. And it's great in the sense that they really know how the community operates because they've been here so long, even though they might have been on the sidelines, which is much harder with new people who are trying to join and who do join in a year or two. And used to be that people were like, within 6 months someone should be able to join, and now I think more and more people understand, like, this is too complicated for someone to join in 6 months. It's really, even when you think you know each other, there's so much that's unrevealed. So, again, where am I going?
Younger people.
Yes. So it's exciting that they can really take over the administration of the community. This is the most euphoric thing for me, since restructuring allowed them to become members, and they're actually doing it, and they actually understand, and they're actually holding the line at some principles that could have been lost. And every time this occurs in a meeting or I hear about it, it's just almost a wonder. It's like, wow, they really are quality people. They really do get what we were trying to do here. They are expressing what I would have hoped, or many of us at the beginning would have hoped, would be the goals of, or the underpinnings of why we do what we do. So that's very hopeful to me. And but where it's going, I think the economic thing is a much bigger feature than we considered in the beginning. We knew that it was important, but we really just said people will work it out for themselves and stuff like that. And that's kind of what's happening, but it's a big challenge. And we'll just see. I don't know enough about how the younger generations have adjusted to the economy and the demands and the possibilities. So maybe young people are coming here and they're already diversified. They have this way to, whatever they've been doing up until now, they have ways of earning a living that don't require them going to a job every day, that would allow them to also be here. I don't know. I'm glad you bring it up, or our conversation brings it up, because I can actually start paying attention to that when I'm talking to people. So how are you earning your living, and is it feasible for things that we just took for granted? Maybe people are still taking for granted. So that's my, I would have loved if the spiritual, aesthetic underpinnings of our original dream team were the dominant things, but I understand that there's a conflict between that and the size of what we set out to do. I think a smaller group could control what it was becoming much better than something that says, but we're going to grow to be 120, 160 people. Like, oh yeah? And they're all going to work together just the way you have in mind, right? This is human beings in America in 2010 or 20. Come on. So,
That's great. I wanted to ask about that because can you say a little bit about, because I know there was sort of a permaculture design that was done and sort of an assessment of the carrying capacity before you even built anything, and so you did that. So I'm curious to say a little bit about that, and then how the community relates to that now.
Peter Bain and Chuck Marsh, but exquisitely Peter, and then there were other knowledgeable people in the beginning, was really good at assessing land. In fact, we have the annual spring Organic Growers Conference this coming weekend, and they're bringing Peter. I don't think he's ever done anything at the Organic Growers. Well, they're bringing him from Michigan to talk about finding, buying, and loving the land. It's kind of amazing. His dad was a surveyor, and that gave him a lot of understanding about land. And I think he was the leader in the original site plan of the whole community. Like our permaculture guys, him and Goodhart Brown and Chuck Marsh, and also Paul Caron, who lives here but isn't necessarily a permaculture guy. They were the four guys who walked around and huddled and da-da-da. We were all together also doing it, but in a lot of ways they led the assessment of what can we do with this property? Where can people live? Where can they farm? And what can this property support? So there were like, we don't have a whole lot of arable land here. We're in the mountains. We actually have a very limited amount, maybe 25, if you push it, 40 acres that could actually successfully be farmed. And I think there's some tension right now about what does farm mean? Does it mean all them animals, or can we grow food? Not that animals don't turn into food, but we haven't solved that issue, and it's going to be an ongoing tug of, you can move cows through or pigs through for a while, but we want to take that back and grow some other things, So we'll see, and maybe what we need. I think this isn't where the question went, but I think one of the things that needs to be built here that is in the original idea that hasn't been much of a focus is the whole bioregional thing. We never said we were going to produce everything we needed. We always understood that we need to be connected enough in the broader field so that the intelligent human exchange systems can happen. And it's richer, it's better, it's wiser. It's something that takes continents thousands of years to evolve, and it's the good goal, but we don't talk about that so much. So in this past year, I'm finding myself saying, and what's the bioregional part of this? Where's that expectation or goal? If I live long enough, maybe someone will hear me. I'm exaggerating. And particularly Zev Friedman, who's almost, like the main permaculture legacy is his here right now, this young guy, because he's not, nobody was a perfect communicator, but he's so deliciously committed and was schooled with these earlier permaculture people, so it seems to me, so that I just feel like he's got the vision too, and he will, it's not that I feel, I see that he is doing all kinds of things that are very bioregional already to try to connect folks. Okay, back to the question of, are we living it and how are we not living it? Yeah, whatever it is, I see that for me what's missing is this common spiritual focus, and I accept that it overall doesn't matter if that's my focus. Nothing prevents me from serving it, and investing in it and so on. So more and more I just eliminate the voice that says, this wasn't supposed to happen this way. We were supposed to do this as a group, and just get your needs met, for goodness sake. But I was supposed to have this in the community I was in. Well, you might have to go outside of the community to get that need taken care of. And so I think some people earlier than me, we have a gnat infestation here. Some people earlier than me surrendered to those things, and it's taken me a lot longer to go, okay, you got so used to getting your wishes that you made some assumptions that aren't reasonable. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost with the what you're saying about the bioregional thing, like not, you're not necessarily going to get all your food needs met right within the property lines of this community. You're not necessarily going to get all your social needs met. You're not necessarily going to get all your spiritual needs met.
Yeah, yeah, but still a good life.
Yeah.
Fortunate life.
I can't think of anything else in particular. Is there anything else that you want to share with the world about your life here at Earthaven, or about what you think Earthaven means to the world?
I don't think I can go there, but something that I thought of talking about that I think is very valuable here is the embrace, because of certain people who've played a strong role, the embrace of NVC at Earthaven, in the sense that everyone has to take an extended class so that they know it, which means they're held somewhat responsible, even if it takes a long time before you actually can incorporate that in a fluid, natural way, and in the last few years, a gradual acceptance that the restorative circles model is something that we need and can use and do use, that teaches us what we haven't understood about human communities and how things evolve in their more balanced way, not just like the left brain decides that we got a problem and we're going to solve it, but it's much more complex and needs lots of time to evolve. And that gives me a lot of encouragement that, wow, those are very important things. And that is a kind of leftover, or not a leftover, but an evolution of some of our early concerns. We tried a lot of different things that didn't quite gel with this community, like process work, process-oriented psychology. I got very much into that in the mid-90s and brought people here from Oregon and elsewhere, and it just didn't gel with the Earthaven mindset. So some things did, some concepts are probably in our language now, but it didn't turn out to be thing. And then Steve Torma was really instrumental at going to workshops and following different things. We had a whole series of radical honesty things, mediation having been an important thing for us in the beginning, and because people were pretty articulate and healthy, I guess, in some ways, we in the beginning spoke really openly about conflict and talked about it and stuff. But eventually, we ran into some difficult corners that allowed some stuff to slide under the rug and blah, 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 blah. It's just human. So eventually Steve wound up becoming an enthusiast and a trained person in NVC, and it works really well for the kind of people that are at Earthaven. It's a way of people, for most part, I'm sure as you know, feeling safest of many of the models to talk about their needs and feelings, and it's very much, it's not required for restorative circles, but it really helps restorative circles